Call the meeting in order of the Wilmington City Council. I'd like to welcome all those who are with us this evening and all those who are watching us at home. Thank you for taking an interest in your government. This time I'd like to introduce Reverend Patricia Smith, pastor of St. Andrew's AME Zion Church, for the invocation, and ask if everyone will stand and remain standing afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend, welcome.
Good evening. Let us pray. Most holy and all-wise God, we come now in the name of Jesus, Lord. We come thanking you and praising you for this day, for this is the day that you have made. We are rejoicing and we are glad in it. Lord, we pray now that you look over us in this meeting, O Lord, and we pray that you bless each and every one of these council members, O Lord, and we pray that you give them guidance, give them direction, give them all that they need in order to lead the city. And Lord, we pray for the citizens of this great city. We pray now, Lord, that whatever is going on in this city, that you cover us, O Lord, and protect and keep us. And Lord, we thank you for all that you're going to do, all that you've already done. And Lord, we thank you even now for what you're doing in this city and in this council. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one presentation this evening from Wilmington Housing Authority. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Tyrone Garrett, who's the Executive Director of the Wilmington Housing Authority, to come up for that presentation. Mr. Garrett, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I just want to take a few minutes also to recognize that I have with me my commissioners, Chairman Hovis, Commissioner Khan, and also Commissioner Hollis-Briggs. So the reason I'm here before you this evening is just to give you an update. I know that about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, the council, along with the county commission, allowed the housing authority to be loaned approximately $1.3 million, respectively, from each organization, each agency. And so what I wanted to do was be proactive and come before you on behalf of the commissioners and on behalf of the residents to let you know how it's going. If you recall, what we wanted to do was bring on a narrow scope of work, bring on contractors, and utilize the funding that you afforded us in a capital effort. And this is just where we are as of a 60-day assessment. Right now, we have approximately 150 units that we started out with. Nope, this isn't the right one. So we're going to have to play this by ear. I apologize, this isn't the right presentation. Yeah, that's 9, that's 722. If not, members of the council, I might have to wing this if it's not up there.
Mr. Garrett, you could always come back if you need to.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to do that because the presentation was important. So, man, I was first on the agenda. So. Jesus, compared to last time.
That's
but
quite all right.
I do apologize. So you can continue with the agenda.
I guess my question before you go, and I know we'll reschedule you for our next meeting. How is it going?
It's going well. Actually, we have we've been able to get 36 families back into the units, right? So that's over the course of about 60 days so far. So we've been able to bring 36 families back into their homes. The idea is to have, and we're only doing based on today's date. I want to do an as-of date because we still have 15 more days left in this month for the most part. The idea is that we have approximately 25 units that we can bring back online before the end of October. So we're moving right along. The goal, again, is still to have everyone in their units or some form of housing, permanent housing, before the end of the year. We do have 31 units that are being supported by the NCORE grant that came to us. And that's going to support 31 units that need a little more reconstruction work. So that was going to take a little longer, about 6 months, to have those units brought back online. But the idea is still to have those families placed in some type of permanent housing, also using the Housing Choice Voucher program that we have. So it's going well. We've picked up speed. It took a minute for the contractors to get into a rhythm, but we've been able to do that. One thing I do also want to identify is that from my review, after we narrowed down the scope of work, we actually identified approximately 25 units that could be done in-house that did not necessarily need a contractor, and we did not need to expend any outside funding. So we put together a team, and those individuals on that 6-person team are putting those units back together now as we speak. So by the end of the year, we should be almost there. I'm not going to think. Here we go. We're okay? Cool. Can I run?
Yeah,
Oh,
go right
thank you.
ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, you got it. Yes, just go to the next one. Cool, thank you. Okay, so here we go. Right now, as you can see, we have well, 46 families have been in place. Actually, I said 36, but 46 families are back into some type of permanent housing, and that's been done over the last 60 days. Our next slide. Again, it shows Housing Choice Voucher, a combination of Housing Choice Voucher and permanent housing within the public housing portfolio. The funding that we've used up to this particular point has been right around $315,000 between both the county and the city. So we've been using those funds interchangeably to put units back online. And again, those units and the funding that you've provided to us has only been for capital need. We haven't used any of the money for any soft concepts or anything in that regard. We haven't purchased furniture or anything like that, or given per diems out with the funding that has been provided to us. This slide shows that the number of remediated units are 36 in total. And again, as you can see, for the month of October, to this date, we've only had 8 units put back online. But again, we still have about 15 more days to go before the end of the month. We have actually 25 units that are in inspection mode. For the most part, 60% of those units always pass inspection on the first try. So those units will be put back online immediately. The other units will go back into some type of remediation form where there might be something in the air ducts or something like that that we need to deal with. We'll clean those out and then go back for our second inspection, and those will go back online also. This is an example of what the city manager will receive along with the finance department at both the city and the county. This is the cover sheet for each unit that we've completed. So for instance, in this particular case, you show $2,800 that was utilized for this particular unit to go back online. This is the cover sheet to allow for a review and possibly, if necessary, an audit of all the funding that has actually been expended. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to track exactly where the money has gone. So each unit will have a cover letter like this, along with backup documentation showing exactly the work that was being done, the contractor that was identified, and also will note the inspection report along with the dollars that were spent. Now, we can jump into actually what we're doing in terms of the Housing Authority itself real quickly. Again, over the last 3 months, it's been a rebrand effort of the authority across the board. This is an example of a work order report that I have given to me on a monthly basis. It identifies exactly how many work orders have actually been completed on behalf of the Housing Authority at each individual site. I use metrics to be able to track everything that's going on in the same vein as we're tracking the remediated units and the residents that are displaced. So I get real-time information on a monthly basis of exactly where we are and where we need to improve. For me, what happens is I use a report card in the evaluation format. That evaluation format shows that anything that is below 90%, is fair. Anything below 80%, 79% or below, needs improvement. So anything 90 and above, we're in the right track. Anything below that, we're grading pretty hard, because the idea is to have everything above 90% at all times. Work orders, completions, in addition to rent collection, which is the next slide, I believe. Yes, this is an example of a slide that I get, report that I get from our property manager on the 15th of each month, identifying rent collection. If the rent collection is not, as I said, 90% or above, it's either fair or needs improvement. And we're moving in the direction where there was a period of time due to COVID, rent wasn't being collected at the necessary pace. Now we have started to do such. And it's in our purview to do it with discretion, and also compassion in certain cases. Some individuals have certain circumstances that we need to take into consideration at times as to why they have not paid their rent. Anyone outside of that realm, we deal with appropriately through our system. The only reason I bring that up is because we receive on a monthly basis $510,000 from HUD as a direct subsidy payment. The remaining dollar amount for our budget comes from rent. So it's vital that we do collect rent, where at one time we were hovering around maybe $100,000, $120,000 per month in rent collection. We really need to be more in the realm of about $300,000, $350,000 on a monthly basis. This is just, again, the PMO report, which shows actually what the percentage collection is by site. And that way I can pinpoint exactly where we need actual improvement. Again, key changes to the organization. We've made a drastic reduction in the number of days that it takes to pay vendors. We were behind when I came on board. We were actually dating invoices back to 2020. We've since caught up. We're about 30 days out from being completely caught up with our vendors and 30 days out through payment. That's something that's important, because as we go through our process of strategic planning and we need to bring on contractors, we need to have people that know we are going to pay them on time, because they're vital to their business. So we've worked on that a great deal. We also received the grant from Walmart. Originally, as I explained to the commissioners yesterday, the original Walmart grant was for only $1,000. And then I realized that we actually received grants from various Walmarts. It's not just Walmart itself. So other stores also donated and gave us grant money, which accumulated to approximately $13,000 in total. This funding is going to be used by our staff to purchase incidentals for those residents that were displaced. So a family goes out and they purchase a mattress, or they purchase some furniture, or need bathroom supplies. We're able to give this to them directly by going out and purchasing it on their behalf. And that brings me to the point of furniture was an obstacle for residents returning to their units after the unit had been remediated. What we did was we set up a system, a voucher system, where a resident could receive a voucher for a certain dollar amount based on bedroom size. And then they could go to 2 stores within the city and purchase furniture. Or they could take the cash equivalent and purchase furniture on their own, in addition to working with various nonprofit organizations who have furniture to donate and or sell at a discounted dollar amount. So we did not leave our residents hanging, in essence. We are supporting them all the way through this process. Now, the stipend that we're giving them for furniture does not necessarily make that family whole, but it does give them the opportunity to recoup some of their belongings and basically start again in their unit after it has been remediated. Another piece to our puzzle right now is that we're doing a portfolio-wide strategic assessment, physical needs assessment of every single property within the authority. That will give me an idea of what are our immediate, short-range, and long-term goals and plans in terms of rehabilitation and or recapitalization through development. That's something that we need to utilize. An example of that would be the development at Hillcrest, which we're working on now. In addition, we're going to be doing a rehabilitation effort at Solomon Towers, along with more than likely working on something with Houston Moore in the future. And then our last piece is just rebranding the agency completely. And me coming before you is an example of rebranding, meaning that we want to show that we have the actual capacity to get things done, to be part of this community as a strong pillar, to ensure that we support our residents as we move forward. And we want you to have confidence in our organization as an agency to do just that. And I'm able to answer any questions that you may have for me right now.
Mr. Garrett, are there any questions for Mr. Garrett? Yes, sir, Mr. Barnett.
Thank you for the report. We appreciate you coming back and keeping us up to date. 2 quick questions. I noticed, for example, that sheet that you gave where you said, we're fixing this house and it was about $3,000. Is that the average cost of what you're finding to repair these homes?
No, it's not. Because one thing from our scope of work I wanted to do was identify which units were low-hanging fruit that we could get online quickly. Okay. That's what I just showed you. That was an example of one of those type of units that really didn't need a lot of extensive work. We didn't need to go all the way up to the $25,000 cap.
Okay.
So those are the units that we have really put back online quickly. Of the 36, those are those units that were low-hanging fruit, didn't reach the $25,000 threshold. And so I could show you that
Okay.
because that's what we're getting ready to bill for.
All right, and then the second question is, how many families are still in hotels?
104,
104.
yes, either in a hotel or with another family member.
Okay, and is that part of the 25 that's going to be taken out at the end of the month, or?
Yes, yes,
good.
yes. So hopefully by the end of the month, we'll have another 25 to come off of that 104.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So we
Good
drop
job.
down below 100 before the end of the month.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate your work.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Garrett, thank you.
Okay.
Good
Thank
work.
you. Thank you. And again, on behalf of the commissioners and the residents, we do appreciate your support.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Brings us to our next item of business, which is our consent agenda, items 1 through 3. Are there any items any council member would like to hear separately? If not, what are the wishes of council? Have a
Mr.
motion
Mayor.
here. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, just one quick note. You have been provided a corrected copy of C3 at your place. This is the one that had the incorrect number for the base on the license agreement. So we have corrected that, and it is before you.
I amend my motion to accept it as redrawn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second, we have Councilman Reinbark, seconded by Councilman Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our public information. We have 6 speakers that have signed up to speak with us this evening. Each speaker will be allocated 5 minutes. Our first speaker is Ms. Kara Snook, who will be speaking to us about Black Lives Do Matter art installation. Ms. Snook? Is Ms. Snook here? Okay. Going on to the next one, Ms. Sue Lawfer Boone, who will be speaking to us about drug trafficking at corner of Anderson and Rankin Street. Ms. Boone?
Good evening. Thank you for seeing me tonight. I am a new resident here, and I live at 413 Anderson Street. Okay, sorry. And I love the new neighborhood, but we have a problem. The corner of Rankin and Anderson has become unbelievable amount of drug dealing. There are several situations that are going on. We've had excessive loitering at Ruth's Grocery Store, which her address is 902 Rankin Street, which the side of it comes down of Anderson, and there's an ATM machine there that is basically where everybody's getting their cash from. From 3 to 5 in the afternoon, and I have all these notes and I was going to read them, but a typical day there, and I mean every day, is from 3 to 5, you have a wave of the dealers, and they are there when the school buses get off. I watch these little kids watching these deals go down. It's not funny. My neighbors have been putting up with this for 3 years. They're tired of it. And they come in individually. A great deal of them are here with me today to show you that we do have the support of a neighborhood, not only on Anderson, but on Rankin. It's destroying the neighborhood. The garbage is ridiculous. I'm several houses down from where the young man was shot, basically, roughly 2 weeks ago. This is what's happening. These are not drugs. This is not weed. This is heroin and everything, another bad thing. I personally have called the police some nights 3 to 4 times. I have to tell you, from living all over the country for business, I have never seen such a good response from a police department in my life. I commend you for that. We need help. We're willing to do anything that the police need to help. We need your help. We need a street light on Anderson, desperately, to illuminate that one corner, because that is where the dealers are parking, because they can't be seen. I have agreed with the police department and have notified them that tomorrow I'm having a camera installed that will zoom in on that corner. I don't care. They all know it's me calling. They tried to break into my house on Saturday night when I was home. The police were there in a matter of seconds. So the police will have direct contact. This camera will be hooked up to the police department for their use. We need your help with giving them giving any support you can to the police for this. We need streetlights. We feel that these are not homeless people. There is not only at Roos, the grocery store and the ATM are the problem, but we have a rooming house or a boarding house, you call it, whichever one, which is directly across on Rankin, which is, I had all these new addresses I have. They're at the rooming house is at 905 Rankin, and there's anywhere from 10 to 20 people hanging out there every day, all day. And I get up early to get the dog out. The dealers are sitting on the corner at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. They're there from 3 to 5 when the buses get out, and then come 8, 8:30 when it gets dark. They are everywhere. They've caught me taking pictures of their cars, so they just fly down Anderson. We need help to stop this. We're at our wits' end as a neighborhood of what we can do. And if any ideas that you have, and if you can give us whatever help you can, these are not homeless people. I've had 2 parents actually come to me that their kid had gone home and said there's this witch at the end of the street that's calling the police. And one of the mothers walked up and she goes, have him put in jail. Yesterday, a father came up to me. I just sitting on the porch, and about 3 in the afternoon, he goes, do me a favor and put my son in jail. I can't do anything with him. And this is what's going on. That a lot of them live at the rooming house. They hang out. The grocery store does absolutely nothing about them loitering on that corner. And this is where the problem is. And there's a sign this big on the grocery store that says no loitering, no drinking. And they're going in and out of that store, and they don't come out with anything. They just, before it got a little bit cooler, I mean, they're parking their little heinies on literally sleeping there all night. There is a utility cabinet of some sort, I'm not sure if it's telephone or electrical, on the back side of the grocery store on her property on the Anderson side street, and I have watched them not only pee there, but basically do everything else there. My other neighbor's granddaughter witnessed one of the guys and then one of the girls having sex up against the tree in front of my house. So this is how it's gotten, how bad it is. We need social workers or somebody to talk to these people, somebody to try to help get them off the streets and off these heavy-duty drugs. I know Wilmington has a lot of programs, and it's going to take one person at a time. And we understand, and I understand, that this is not something that's going to be solved overnight, because I understand that it is this problem throughout the city. This corner is hot, though, and it's not right. There's young children, a lot of young children, and a lot of elderly right there in that neighborhood, and it's not fair. I mean, I've called the police on trying to get some of them off the sidewalk in front of my house, and the officers had to actually pick up the syringes for me, because I won't touch them. They're trashing, they're literally trashing. They knock down fences, they do whatever they think they can do. And we don't know what to do, but the police are working with us diligently, very, very much so, and I will continue to do so. But if we need city council's help, and the biggest thing you can do right now is we need street lights, we need light, and that will deter it. There's also a live oak tree, I think it is, on Anderson, that right on the I guess it would be the city grass between the sidewalk and the street. And I need that to get trimmed back some in order for the camera to be effective. And I would appreciate that very much. And yeah, it rattles me a little bit, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying. So this is why I'm here. I want to show the neighbors that they can bring back the neighborhood. It can be such a beautiful neighborhood there. And there's no reason for it like this. It's just that they haven't been able to catch them. They have they have spotters, and they watch whatever direction they're coming from, and that's part of the problem too. I today witnessed an officer who was doing what they promised they would do. They sat at the corner from 3 to 5, I think it was. Not one deal. The officer left because he can't stay for the week, and it wasn't 30 seconds, and there were a minimum of two to three dealers on the corner, and they came out of the woodwork, the buyers. And that ATM has a line going to it, and then they go over to the car, and the game is the dealers drive by once, honk the horn. That means go get your money. They come back around the second time, honk twice, park in the dark, and that means they have the drugs. I've told the police this, and they know it. So, but I need the tree trimmed, we need lighting, and we need as much, anything you can all think of to help us. And I think getting some of these people, because they're not homeless, getting them into programs, getting somebody to try to intervene with them, to get them into some programs that I know are available in Wilmington. You have a great structure for that. Whether they listen or not, I don't know. But I do know, and I do question a few things. The one spotter, I pointed out to one of the undercover agents, and he said, oh yeah, he's been arrested 14 times for cocaine possession. I'm like, okay, why is he not in jail? That's another question, okay? I think maybe looking at maybe stiffer sentences for these guys will help, because they know who all of them are. They just seem to go in jail and out of jail. And that, I think, is something that you all could address possibly as well. Okay, is my 5 minutes up yet? I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Mr. Alan Cumber, who is speaking to us about failure of police officers and internal affairs to respond to abuse by its employees. Cumber here? Mr. Cumber? Okay. Next speaker is Mr. Manuel Lloyd, who will be speaking to us about Black Lives Do Matter sign removal.
Good evening, councilmen, councilwoman, Mr. Mayor. Wilmington is home for me in a lot of ways, not only my hometown, but also my college town. I'm a proud graduate of both UNCW with a degree in political science and a degree in history from K-Fair Community College. And history is kind of what's brought me here today as we talk about the Black Lives Do Matter sign. There's enough reason to not take the sign down, for just its general meaning. But the main issue is that to take this sign down in Wilmington here would be close to malpractice, because history has shown us that many times Black lives have not mattered in Wilmington. The Black lives of my ancestors did not matter because those artisans, agricultural and architectural geniuses were brought here enslaved as chattel and property. Black lives did not matter in 1898 when Black folks made a political, social, economic way in collaboration with white citizens, and they were slaughtered and ran out of their homes because of it. Black lives didn't matter in the Jim Crow era, when pages were missing from the books of students at Williston who nonetheless received an amazing education and had immense pride in what they called the greatest school under the sun, until 1969, when their school was shut down because the Black lives of those students who had a school catered to their educational, cultural, and social needs did not matter, nor did the Black lives of their amazing educators who lost their jobs. Black lives didn't matter in 1971 when the Wilmington 10 were arrested, or 72 when bulldozers razed the North Side, or 2003 when the city itself promised and failed to build a grocery store in that poverty-stricken area, or 2006 when neighborhood schools helped exacerbate educational gaps and poverty despite rampant pleas that it would hurt our children, or 2010 when it happened again in spite of those pleas again, or the rampant dislocation due to climate change, gentrification that's happening now, or. And I'm going through all this because lists can go on times when Wilmington and New Hanover County itself has symbolically, physically, economically, politically, or literally said that Black lives do not matter. And as a native of this city, it's difficult for me. I can trace my roots back in Wilmington to before 1898. My family has lived up in Lovegrove, across from Seabreeze. We've been preachers, teachers, coaches, and everything in between. My mother, Evelyn Bradley, was the president of the YWCA, and I'm the legacy of Black Wilmington Bradleys, Swepsons, Mosleys, and Moores. Again, I went to community college here and university here. I live and work in this city, and to see a decision to take down a sign that cost nothing, a sign that 18 artists poured their hearts out to compose, that is artistically beautiful, that fills me with a sense of joy and encouragement every time I pass it, whether I'm going downtown to my favorite comic book shop, Memory Lane, whether I'm going to church at Chestnut Street Presbyterian Church. It fills me with a sense of joy and encouragement. And the fact that, to have it on the record that the city of Wilmington does not want that sign, that the city of Wilmington does not want to see Black Lives Do Matter on public property, makes it hard for me to be proud of my city. And that hurts. It hurts even more when I see folks on the streets for whom their Black Lives Do Matter and for whom Black Lives Do Matter to them. From Sierra Washington and Quaylen Bowen at the Northside Food Co-op, who are working to build that grocery store that is 35 years in the making, to Shakima Kintwana and Jamar Jenkins at Channel, who are helping to reestablish Black economy and Black wealth. Sean Palmer and the champions at the Upperman Center and UNCW, who make sure you will not be able to leave 601 South College Road without knowing you are in Gullah country in a Black cultural gold mine. To paragons like Big B and Sandra McClammy, for whom the county, city, and all of us really owe a lifetime worth of gratitude, and definitely some checks for their DJing. So as I round up my time, I just ask you to reconsider and do not let this be another time in which Wilmington said Black lives don't matter. Let it be a time where Wilmington said it did. And lastly, I just want to say, if not for me, I'm not born and raised here. I was born in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I moved here when I was 2. But my grandfather was born and raised here, John H. Bradley III. He owned a bookstore off of Red Cross Street. He coached softball with Mr. William Murphy, down Winter Optimist. He's not here anymore. He passed away in 2021. He believed that Black Lives Matter. When at his funeral, folks would come up and talk to him about the way he supported them and coached them, and they did it in a way that showed that he believed that Black Lives Matter. So please do not get rid of the sign. There's a lot more that can be done. There's a lot more that should be done, and this is just an easy step, an easy thing that you can do. As soon as you come into Wilmington, you know that Black lives do matter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Ms. Susan Rogers, who will be speaking to us about rezone Watermark Marina.
Good evening. This is a little freaky for me. My name is Susan Rogers. I grew up in Wilmington. I went to Forest Hills Elementary School and Chestnut and New Hanover High School, and that's all there was. At my age, I have seen enormous changes in this city. When I grew up, Market Street going out of town toward the beach was a country road with a few motels, a drive-in theater, and a barbecue restaurant, probably a few other things, but not much. It seemed like it changed overnight into an ugly mess of commercial properties. In the last 10 years, it appears apartment buildings have become it in development. Carolina Beach Road, Oleander Drive, 17th Street, Piner Road, Randall Parkway. Y'all will probably approve 2 new ones tonight. Little did I know that I was going to be coming to talk when one of them was going to be what I'm not talking about. Americans look with dismay at the destruction of the trees in the rainforest, but have no qualms mowing down trees right here. One week, it's a property dense with trees, and the next, it's asphalt dense with cars and structures. Because of Watermark, and that is the area that I am concerned about tonight, and because of its rezone, I became acquainted with the infill concept. Infill and its prescribed ability to provide more affordable housing has left out the fact that roads do have max capacity for cars. Adding 500 cars and a stoplight creates unsolvable problems. They're unsolvable. You're just going to have cars bumper to bumper. I look back at my life with some disappointment in myself. I see someone who complained a lot about certain development, but I never did anything. I'm not against development. If you live in a desirable location, growth is inevitable. As it turns out, a year ago, my husband and I purchased a travel trailer. Can't park it in the driveway, so we needed a storage facility, and we found Watermark. So for the last year, we have driven on Independence Road to the intersection on River Road. What a mess. A steady stream of cars coming north, a steady stream going west. The Watermark rezoning is what brings me here tonight. I am old. Now is the time for me to express the concerns I have left unsaid all my life. Watermark is a very nice piece of property, and it deserves to be utilized. When I heard the request was for 248 units, I was stunned. 248 plus cars. Have you seen this property? I can't begin to imagine that many cars going in and out of there. It is not a very large space. Most of the 40-plus acres are wetlands. When I look at a map, it looks like 60 to 75% of the acreage is wetlands. The applicant stated the maximum multi-dwelling parking allowed for this development would be 682 spaces. But they will only include 439. Of course, it will only be 439. There is no more space for parking. Almost every square inch of the buildable property will have either a structure or asphalt, except a pool. Will there be runoff from 439 cars? Of course there will be. Leaking antifreeze, engine oil, maybe gasoline. Additionally, there may be some pesticide and fertilizer runoff, but not much because there's not a lot of grass. It looks like the plans do include some shrubs or trees placed intermittently through the parking spaces. The low elevation of this property with a CAMA conservation designation and its proximity to the river assures there will be runoff into the wetlands. I don't care what they're thinking, it's going to happen. Projects located in these areas are limited to 25% impervious coverage, unless the site meets the standards for exceptional design. The applicants say the site will not need to meet the standards for exceptional design because the proposed development will reduce impervious coverage to approximately 14.7%. The only way I see they do that is they're including the wetlands as part of that property, because the building part of that property is going to be covered. As to the traffic at the intersection, the applicants include a descriptive table with the suggested number of vehicles exiting and entering the property at the peak hours. I don't know what their peak hours are, but my husband and I have gone over there between 8 and 9 on many mornings. Nobody's going in and out of there but us. No, we have never seen anyone else going in, but they kind of tally that into their people going in and out. I tried to visualize the approximate number of vehicles coming and going the applicant has provided. I can't. Over 100 cars trying to get out during the peak hour is going to be backed up from that road probably to the river. The parking lot, they won't be able to move. They won't be able to get out. It will be packed. And then in the evening, that 100 cars will be returning. And they'll all be at the River Road stoplight, which is a total mess all by itself right now because of the river lights. Putting an extra just 50 cars on that road would probably have them backed up to Carolina Beach Road, and it's crazy. In their proposal for the applicants for that rezoning, they included the TIA report, I guess, that was written for River Lights. And they came up with, would there be a stoplight? Would there be a roundabout? They were supposed to widen the roads. It looked to me like the information they had, this all should have been done in 2017. Now, I might have been reading it wrong, but it looked like it should have already had something done to that intersection. The idea of apartments in that location, I don't really disagree with it. It's really a cool location. But it's too enormous. I don't know if any of y'all have been to that property, but if you go in there and you try to imagine that many, am I done?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
All
sorry,
right,
Ms.
I'm
Rogers, if
done.
you could just wrap it up.
And I think it's really kind of cool that these people are here to protect the area that I grew up in.
Thank you, ma'am. Last speaker this evening is Mr. Brandon Hickman, who will also be speaking to us about Black Lives Do Matter sign. Mr. Hickman, welcome.
Good evening. I went to a Baptist church, so you got to talk back to me. Good evening. How y'all doing? All right. I'm here on behalf of myself, a kid who grew up on the north side. I'm also here on behalf of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the first black intercollegiate Greek fraternity. Tonight, Mayor and City Council, I ask that you reconsider your vote on the Black Lives Do Matter sign inside of Thomas Gervais Park. You're saying, why should we do this? One, because it's inside of Thomas Gervais Park. If you know who Thomas Gervais is, a founding member of the Wilmington chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, also the editor and owner of the Wilmington Journal. Of all people, I'm quite sure Thomas Gervais knew that Black lives did matter. Along with him and Dr. Hubert Eaton Sr., they were charged with getting Dr. Martin Luther King here on April 1968. But we know that Dr. King stayed one more night in Memphis, so the world didn't see him alive again as we wanted him to visit Wilmington. Brother Gervais and Brother Eaton believed that Black lives did matter, and even that many years ago. And they knew that they had to be uncomfortable to be and succeed and to be comfortable. One of our council members, I know for a fact, graduated from New Hanover High School in 1967. And during that time, it was uncomfortable. But he pursued and went through the things he needed to go through and became an entrepreneur. I myself went to New Hanover High School, and I had to endure and be uncomfortable and became an entrepreneur. Another one of our city council members, and I know if I say this word, they will understand, that first week of being a knob at the Citadel is uncomfortable. And the only reason I know is because I went to the Citadel. Commonality and uncomfortableness is what you must have to get to success. Why even try success if you're not willing to be a little bit uncomfortable? Another council said it doesn't matter. All lives won't matter until Black lives matter. And I know they had to be uncomfortable because at the end of that, they voted for the sign to be taken down. That has to be uncomfortable. It was said 2 weeks ago, I was uncomfortable here. We get the picture. It's been 2 years. We shut down a whole entire week for a flowering bush. And it's been 60 years. We get the picture. It's an azalea. We want folks to know that those little kids that grew up and still are growing up 1 block, 2 block, 4 blocks away from that sign, on the other side of town, on the south side, that their skin means something, that they're okay being successful, but they have to go through the struggle. My highly exalted fraternity brother spoke right here in this building, the Honorable Frederick Douglass, and he said there is no strength, no success without the struggle. So tonight I ask you, City Council, Mayor and City Council, to reconsider, to have the hard conversation in governance, to have the hard conversation with your constituents when you go back out, to reconsider leaving the sign inside of Thomas Gervais Park, a man who felt that black lives didn't matter, so much so that he was the CNN for the black community here in Wilmington, that he made sure that there was a route to get here for Martin Luther King to speak on April 8th, which he never got here. Remember the struggles that you have gone through. Remember being uncomfortable in that knob class that first week, but you graduated, but you became an entrepreneur, but you are mayor pro temp, but you are the mayor. There are some things that you went through. And if we're not going to be uncomfortable, then we don't need to try success. And today, I urge you to reconsider and let's try change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Our next item of business is our public hearings. Item PH1 is the ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 8.84 acres of land located at 2916 Market Street and 14 Wayne Drive from an O&I office and institutional district and R15 moderate density single dwelling district to MD17 CD high density multi-dwelling residential conditional district for a multi-dwelling residential development with 112 apartments and 36 townhomes. I have been notified by our city manager that there has been a request to continue the public hearing to council's second meeting in November. So, Mr. Manager, did you want to?
That is correct. We are, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, we are asking that this item be continued to November the 15th. Excuse me again, 2022. Both the applicant and legal representation for the opposition have agreed to that.
Okay. We have a motion to continue that item to November 15th, 2022 by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Barnett. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. So we will be hearing this on November the 15th, 2022. Next item of business, item PH2, which is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair the dwelling at 1015 South 2nd Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Carter. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. Our Chief Code Enforcement.
Order, please. I'm sorry. Could y'all please pipe down while you leave? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Manager.
Our Chief Code Enforcement Officer, Brian Renner, will overview this item for us.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Council. I'm Brian Renner, Chief Code Enforcement Officer for Community Services. The property we're looking at this evening is 1015 South 2nd Street. This is a single-story, single-family house. It was built in 1917. It is occupied. It is occupied by what I'll call tenants. In this house, the property owner is Peyton Heitman, also known as Rebecca Heitman, and she is the heir of Henry Thomas Heitman IV, who passed away in September of 2021. We've been managing this case for a few years now, and we were working with Mr. Heitman until he passed last year, and we've been working with Mrs. Heitman since. So this is the front of the property. The public nuisance on the property should be abated this week by one of our contractors, but this is what the property looks like from the street. So we started this case back in August of 2020. We took it to Housing Code hearing in February of 2021. Mr. Heitman asked to continue that till April so that he could make some repairs to the house, which he did. And then the order to repair expired July 13th of 2021. With Mr. Heitman passing in September of 2021, we then shifted to work with Mrs. Heitman to get this. Unfortunately, we haven't either had the property vacated or had repairs done to the property since. So the hearing for this, the structure cost for the tax value was $27,900 back in 2020. You can see there's been a drastic increase in that up to 2021 and 2022. Our estimated cost of rehab back in April when we took this to hearing was $10,803, which puts it at 39%. I will say the condition of the house has deteriorated since, especially now that it's been occupied without utilities for about 10 months now. They do have electricity, but no water service. But this is deteriorated, so when you see these photos, you might think that this estimated cost of rehab is very low. It's because it is. So we're moving this case forward to City Council at this time with the goal of working to vacate the unit because of the sanitary conditions within the unit, at which point we'll then work with the owner to either get the place repaired or, based on their plan, based on my conversation with their attorney, is to sell the property. So these are the minimum housing code violations. These are all outlined in the findings of fact that are attached within this item. And now we'll get into some photos. So this is the outside of the house. We have some damage on the roof, especially around the flashing, that is allowing for water intrusion into the house. We have some rotten decay around the outside as well, which we can see here. This is on the inside. There's a lot of hanging light fixtures. There's very tall ceilings in there and a lot of exposed electrical wires within this unit. There is live electrical. We have, this is in one of the bedrooms on the ceiling. This is actually the occupied bedroom, or one of the occupied bedrooms. There's significant damage on the ceiling there and hanging light fixture. There's a very heavy bed bug infestation inside of this unit as well. That's also why we did our best not to show the occupants being in there. They have some bites on them and stuff.
Brian, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You go back to the last slide.
Yeah, of course.
Slide. Is that light working? Is that the glow
Yeah,
I see? Okay,
correct.
that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yep, that is a functional light. This being the hallway ceiling. This is in the kitchen. There is also a very heavy rat infestation inside of this unit. We can see the rat droppings there and some of the rat holes in the kitchen. This is the bathroom. So the bathroom, as I said, they haven't had water in a while. They do bring water in to flush the toilet occasionally. And this is the end of my presentation. I will say that the city and county taxes owed on this property are $4,145. Our public nuisance liens on this are $345. Will probably go up because we're going to be cleaning up the mess that's out there this week, most likely. And we've issued on this property $18,000 in citations so far. So I'm here if there's any questions on this, but as I said, we are working with the owner and the owner's attorney. The plan is to evict the current tenants and then, as I said, sell the property. They're dealing with some lien issues on the property separate from us based on Mr. Heitman's businesses. So hopefully they can clear that and we can get something done with this house. Our ordinance has a 45-day vacate order within it and then a 90-day repair order. The intent of that 90-day repair order is to keep a tight timeline and hold people responsible if they don't take action.
Okay, we have a question here from Councilmember Barnett and then Councilman Ivor.
Wanted clarity. I heard you say when he was the light in the room, there are tenants there.
Correct. There are at least 3 tenants. I've seen 5 different people inside the building, but there are, to my knowledge, at least 3 tenants. My conversation with Mrs. Heitman has been there's been no rent collection since Mr. Heitman passed away back in September, and also probably contributes as to why there's no water service.
Mr. Rumbar.
I know this family, and Tom was a broker just like what I do, and a good guy, had his heart, was in the right place, but he wasn't planning on dying of COVID, and kind of left things in a bit of disarray, and this being obviously the most glaring. You know, I've spoken with Peyton Heitman on a number of occasions. In fact, Brian spoke with you regarding this, and what we're doing needs to be done. and I don't know what their plan is. I've never spoke to their attorney, but it's time that, you know, like all the other ones, come to some type of a head. My question is, if we know that these conditions where they don't have water service, whether they have electricity or not, why it takes, and if I've asked this question before, I know you've answered it, forgive me for asking it again, but the thing that always gets me is how we can leave somebody in a place like this, or tenants, for 10 months, or ever how long, if we find out 9 months ago, how we don't have more teeth in the law to get these folks out of there, because that's, I mean, there's hepatitis and everything else that could go along with something like this, with all the rat infestation, insects, just unsanitary conditions. Out at CFPUA, we bust our chops making sure that we get water to people, because you've got to have that. So that's my question. Is there something we can do to prevent these kinds of lengths of stay in these kinds of conditions, whether the house is condemned or not?
Yeah.
Without the water service.
Well, there's a lot of aspects of capacity of my office to be able to move these things quickly through our processes. As I've said before, and I've told you, I have 4 code enforcement officers and then myself managing over 300 housing code cases on top of thousands of public nuisance cases every year. So there's capacity. And then there's also our ability and willingness to work with property owners. This case is very challenging, seeing as when we had this case initially in hearing and we were working with Mr. Heitman, we were getting progress toward compliance up until he got sick and passed. So there's certain aspects of this case which obviously bring us here today, but there's also aspects of why it took so long.
Well, please don't read into my comments that I think you're doing a yeoman's job, you and your whole crew. And I know that you're not, I won't say overwhelmed, but there's a lot on your plate. But and we see this when you bring stuff to us, the conditions that people are willing to live in. And it's scary. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Mrs. Spears?
Brian, how did this pop up on your radar based on the outside appearance?
This case started from a neighbor complaint. Neighbor said that there were elderly people living in this house without utilities and that they had concerns about the sanitation of the building. That's what started this back in 2020.
And so the people who own the home don't live in the home, they're tenants that live in the home?
Correct. This is a rental unit, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Brian. This time recognize the property owner if the property owner's here. Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask for anybody in the public wishes to speak on item PH2. Madam Clerk, have you received any additional information or any additional comments? I will close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. I have a motion to approve by Councilman Barnett, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item, which is item PH3, which is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish a dwelling at 411 South 13th Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. This time I'd like to recognize our city manager, Ms. Tony Caudill. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Renner will overview this item as well.
So the next property we're going to talk about this evening is 411 South 13th Street. This is a single-story, single-family residence built around 1920. This property is vacant, has been vacant for a long time. The owners of this property are the heirs of Rowena Pierce and including Geneva Clark. We have been in conversation with the family on this property and with their attorney and with their real estate agent. This property has been for sale for several years. There's a lot of title issues that are being worked out, and they're currently going through a partition in the hopes of then being able to sell it. The reason we're here tonight is because we've been working on this property for a very long time. There's been no change or improvement to the property, and we believe it's time to take action on this property, regardless of whether or not it's for sale. So this is the outside, the front of the property. We started this case back in April of 2020. That was from an officer going through that neighborhood and seeing the condition of the house that started this case. We took this to administrative code hearing back in May of 2021. The real estate agent for this property and Ms. Clark attended that hearing. And then the order to demolish or repair this property expired in May of 27th of 2022. So May of this year, they had 1 year to clear the title, sell the property, do something with it. So that order that came out of that hearing, the tax value of that structure was $70,100. The estimated cost to rehab that was $60,218, which puts us at 86% of the building's value, which would make this dilapidated by the city's minimum housing code. These are minimum housing code sections that are outlined within the findings of fact that are included within this packet. So we'll go into the photos now and talk about the house. It was very hard to get a photo, but we can see the chimney has collapsed and there are holes in the roof. This is the side of the house. We have mowed most of that grass on the side and the back of the house. Last week we did that. This is the inside of the house, very common with these vacant, essentially abandoned houses where we have ceiling collapses, holes to the exterior, a lot of debris throughout the house. Here we can see more holes that go through the roof, rotten framing. I actually wasn't able to get to the back side of the house because the floor was so deteriorated, it wasn't safe to walk on, so we were only able to go halfway through the house last week. This is the photo that shows the back side of the house where the floor is completely rotted through, and there are sections of the roof collapsed back there as well. So with this case, as I said, we have been in conversations with the property owners and their attorney. The plan is to clear the title on this property and then sell it and let somebody else deal with the house. This actually sits on 2 parcels, this house does. Sits right in the middle. So based on the condition of this house and based on its location, being right across the street from the middle school and other things that are happening in that neighborhood, we're really looking to keep, again, a 90-day timeline on demolishing this house to motivate some action on it. And then we are at a immediate vacate. The house is vacant. We just need the authority to keep it secure in the event somebody kicks in the door or something like that. So I'm here if there's any questions on that, and I believe there are representatives of the family here as well.
Mr. Waddell.
This may be a question for the representative of the family, but do we know how far along they are in the partition process? I know it's a lengthy process and can be quite intricate, but.
I spoke with Attorney Kent Stevens actually shortly before coming here, and it's my understanding that they are having some notification issues. There's like 30-something errors, and they're having trouble getting contact with like 20 of them. So that's where they're at right now. They're trying to get that certification, but they're moving along. It's just not a fast or easy process.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Brian. This I'd like to recognize the property owner. Is the property owner here? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am,
My name is Elaine Phillips, and I'm the realtor for 411.
Yes, ma'am.
South
Ms.
13th
Phillips,
Street.
could you just pull down the microphone? It is a,
Put down.
yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Thank you very much.
I do have a client for that house, and I got that client we signed a contract in February of 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
And the problem is, we turned it over to an attorney. And, well, first of all, one of the heirs decided she was going to be the executor. So she got all the heirs' addresses to the heirs. And she wrote them and she didn't really hear back from all of them, just some of them. And then she decided to go downtown to the courthouse. So we are working on this. She went to the courthouse, and what they told her was she needed an attorney. Well, she got one attorney who looked at all the paperwork, and then he said it took him about 2 weeks, and he said, well, I think you need another attorney, get somebody else. So she got another attorney who said, and that was in March, and he said that it would take 5 months for him to get everything together, even though she had gotten all the addresses from all of the heirs, the ones that she knew of, don't quote me, and he was hired, and then in, I want to say, August, I called to see, what have you done? Because my client, you know, he really wants this house. He's not going to tear it down. He's going to refurbish it. But he says he still wants it. And my problem, I think what I didn't do was call code enforcement and let them know that we're diligently working on it. It's just that the attorneys are slow.
Ms. Phillips, can I ask you, are you representing the potential buyer of the property? You're not representing, who are you representing, the seller or the buyer?
I'm representing the seller.
The seller, okay. And you have a contract currently with a
Yes.
potential buyer that is going to be buying the property?
Yes, sir.
And I think Mr. Renner had indicated that Mr. Stevens is the attorney that is
Yes,
working
sir.
through the legal process with the heirs.
Yes, sir.
And right now, there's been an identification of 20 heirs,
We counted up 33.
33 heirs? Okay.
He has gotten some information back from all of them, but the house has been being sold for such a small amount of money that, you know, I don't understand why they don't want to sell it.
Who doesn't want it? The seller?
The heirs.
The heirs? So the heirs do not?
Nope.
The heirs do
Yeah,
want to
the
sell?
heirs, the ones that haven't done anything.
Oh, okay.
Mrs. Clark has paid all the taxes and everything on that house ever since her mother passed.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And she wants to go ahead and sell it, but then when they looked up all the information, they found out that we had to have all the
heirs, yes, ma'am.
signature.
That's the problem when
And
there's a
that's
lot of
the
heirs,
problem.
yes. You have to have all of
So
them to
we-
get clear title.
But I do have a client who is interested in buying it.
Okay,
I just, well,
I understand.
I didn't want it to just get torn down because I asked him if he would object to the house being torn down, and he said yes, because I'm just going to refurbish it.
Did Mr. Stevens indicate to you a timeline, or as far as what he thinks?
When I first, when Brenda first talked to him, they told her 5 months, and
Okay.
that was in March, okay? And I counted up, maybe he'll be through by August, and he's not.
Okay, but some of the heirs have indicated that they would sell and they would sign off to give the good, clean title, and then there's some heirs that have not notified or not.
I think, yeah, I
Cool.
think some of them are, I think a couple of them are minors or something
Okay,
like that.
do you know how many in particular, how many people?
from
have-
what
Out
I
of the
heard-
33, or the 15, 20 people that have said, yes, I will sign
Yeah.
and release, and we
Yeah.
have about 10 or 15 that still are out there that
About
have
that
not
many.
come back, okay. Okay, very good. Ms. Rivenbark?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Okay, all right. All right. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if anybody in the public wishes to come forward and speak on item PH3. Okay, seeing none. Are there any comments that you have received, Madam Clerk? Okay. Mr. Rivenbark?
I guess this is for John with the petition, or it's partition, I think it's correct. And with that number of heirs, it's quite unmanageable, I would think. And I know that Brian has spoke to Kent today, and is there anything that you can go around that? Is there any vehicle to get us to where this nice lady needs to be to convey the property without all 33 or ever how many there is?
Speaking purely in general terms, because I don't have all the relevant facts, there's nothing for the city to get around it to allow a sale to go through. There is a receivership process, which quite frankly, the city can avail itself of, but that's to take it for a tax lien or to demolish it, and that takes months and months and months. There's no fast way, and that partition will have to be granted by a court, and that will be a hearing, and just getting notice out to the affected parties will not be easy. I don't know how far along the attorney is, but council member, just to be frank with you, heir property is incredibly difficult, and there's nothing you can do. It takes time. It would shock me if they were able to do anything within these 90 days that's before council now, or quite frankly, within the next several years.
And I believe that lady said that Mrs. Clark the taxes were not any in arrearage, everything was paid up. So
that's what she said, and that this is effectively about the only mechanism council has that has, at this point, any kind of speed at all. And as you can see, the 90 days is a reasonable amount of time I would submit to council for them to do the repairs or the demolition. And that's what the statute looks for, is councils to give reasonable time for property owners to do the repairs or to demolish it.
thank you, sir.
First of all, the state really needs to look at how the state of North Carolina needs to look at how we deal with heirs property, because it's frustrating for me to see it. I can't imagine being on the other side of it. I hope we see some legislation in the near future. But there is the mechanism of the partition, the owner suing for partition, or one of the heirs suing for partition. Are you aware, do they have to have a certain percentage of the heirs, or do they just have to notice all the heirs and have proof of notice?
Council member, I would have to research that a bit. I will not portray myself as a great expert on that aspect of real estate law. I would have to dig into it to give you a definitive answer.
Because it sounds like they've already noticed or sent out notices to the heirs, or they've engaged an attorney to send out notices to heirs, which takes some time. And are, moving forward with the suit of partition. It does take time, but if they're, making good faith efforts to retain their property, I kind of have a hard time moving forward with this one.
Ms. Haynes?
I think in the past, when Mr. O'Grady was here, that we talked about a process of foreclosure where we had this very situation where we have so many heirs and only part of them participate and so forth and so on, that if it could be foreclosed, especially when there's a buyer, a ready and able buyer, I assume, that would be able to purchase it, and then they would have clear title. Is that something the city can be involved in, or what?
Tax foreclosure can do that,
But
but
they
the
don't owe any
taxes are not in arrears.
Okay, so that it could happen, but okay, not in this case. Thank you.
So the request from the city is basically to, tell me again what you want to do. Close it?
Yeah, so we're looking at, this ordinance includes 90 days. That 90 days being a reasonable time, given all of the time that has accumulated thus far, because it is an assessment of reasonable time from the initial hearing. That being said, it is council's discretion if they want to provide additional time. On that would be my recommendation to build that within the ordinance to, instead of 90 days, be, again, council's discretion on that. From my office's standpoint, I'm sticking with 90 days, but we're open you know, it's your discretion.
Brian, real quick, these folks have hired an attorney, some of the heirs have hired an attorney to try to resolve the issue. And I understand that we've got a house here that's in pretty bad shape, but since there is a good faith estimate that these folks are doing, and they have a ready, willing buyer to buy the property and restore it, I think we need to go ahead and give them an additional, at least 150 days or something like that, because I know it's going to take some time. If we have 20, I don't know how many heirs Mr. Stevens has spoken to, how many have agreed to sell the property, how many have agreed not to sell the property or not, he's not been able to contact. So I would ask for some additional time to give Mr. Stevens an opportunity to see what we can do. And I do know, working with heir property, it does take time and effort, but it seems like in this particular case, we have an heir that is spending money to try to resolve it, and we have a buyer that's willing to buy the property and to preserve it and restore it. So that's what I'd like to see.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Council
sir.
has two options. They could, or council could amend the 90 days to whatever amount of time, additional time on the 90 days that you see fit, or you could simply continue this matter, holding open the public hearing to another council meeting, perhaps in January, and then you would have a check-in with the folks and see where they're at, and you could decide how quickly you want to move at that time.
Okay. That's good. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and continue this item to our second meeting in January to get a check-in from Brian and his staff, as well as the heirs and Ms. Phillips. She's still involved. And the public hearing will remain open, so we'll just continue the item to the second meeting in January. Madam Clerk, since I know we don't have a specific date, I guess that may be a little difficult to do.
I think the second meeting in January of 2023, but I think you need a vote and a second.
Yes, ma'am, will do. Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Spears, and we have a second to that by Councilmember Waddell to continue this item, leave the public hearing open to our second meeting in January of 2023. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item 01, which is ordinances. Ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 40.45 acres of land located at 4126 River Road from LI Light Industrial District to MD 17 CD High-Density Multi-Dwelling Residential Conditional District for a 248 apartment development. At this time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Tony Carter. Mr. Carter.
Mr. Mayor, as you noted in the reading of the item, this is the second reading on this ordinance. As such, the staff does not have a presentation ready. We stand ready to answer questions. Mr. Joy would like to advise council a little bit on this item as well.
Mr. Mayor, the clerk made me aware, if council will recall, this was the item where condition 8 was of great debate and was somewhat amended from the dais. And what you have in your packet is extremely close to what council voted on and approved at first reading, but it is missing two things. And if I may read those two things, if the motion on this, if council is so minded, would include the additional language that I read out, then we could move forward. And what is missing is in the first paragraph of condition 8, it ends at a period. It should not end at a period after intersection improvements. Rather, that should be a comma, and it should say, as contemplated by the development agreement, period. And then in the second paragraph, there should be the word if in front of the word construction, and construction only appears once in that second paragraph.
Very good. Mr. Rodmar?
This is all passed muster with everybody involved?
That was simply the condition that was read into the record at the first reading. It just didn't get transcribed correctly, and the clerk made me aware of that, so I've passed it on to council.
Okay. And that's verbatim what was read into the, okay, thank you.
Any further questions from council? Ms. Spears?
Now, I'm certain if I received the packet, we all received the packet. There was some information that I received after that last council meeting that kind of insinuated that one of our council members was involved in this deal. Do we know, am I the only one to know about that, or am I the only one to speak upon that?
What did it say?
Do you don't know what it said?
I don't know I didn't get anything.
You didn't get anything? Nobody got anything? Just me?
Tell me what it said.
It said that you were involved in this deal and that you should recuse yourself if that's true.
We've covered that ground.
How? Where did we cover it?
I don't know who you got that from. Did it come from you, Tony?
No, sir.
No, it didn't come from him. It was in my mailbox, and it wasn't in it. So no other council member saw that. Nobody. It was in a white mailbox. It was in a white envelope this big with our names on it. Well, mine had my name on it.
Yeah, we received something at City Hall insinuating that Mr. Rivenbark was part of this deal.
That's what I just asked.
Yeah, and so
But it wasn't after the meeting, Kevin. It was that was in your box the day of the meeting.
Yeah, well, I got it after the meeting. I didn't get it before the meeting.
Well, Mr. Rivenbark has indicated that he's not part of the deal.
So, well, I mean, that's what I'm asking. Are you part of the deal? You just act like you didn't know what I was talking about.
I didn't get it. You got it, Neil got it, and these four got it. I
I'm
didn't
asking,
get it.
are you a part of the deal?
And I've said no.
Because the mayor just
I've
said that
said
you
no.
said you weren't a part of the deal. When did you say it?
Well, you take his word for it?
Well, when did you say it is
I
what I'm
already
asking.
said no. How many times, Kevin?
But I mean, prior to now, just now, when did you say it? The mayor said we've already addressed it. We didn't.
Mr. Joy, Mr. Joy, you want to discuss this with him? The conversations that you and I had about this?
I don't want to just hear about the conversation that you two had in private. I want to hear about it. I want to have a discussion out in the open for the public to see.
The answer is no.
You're not involved.
How do you want me to say it?
I want you to say, no, I'm not involved.
No, I'm not involved.
Thank you, sir.
God.
Any other questions? Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to the second reading? Motion made by Councilman Waddell, second by Councilman Rivenbark. Discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes 5 to 1. That brings us to our next item, which is item O2A, which is an ordinance amending the City Code, Chapter 4, Section 4-109, sidewalk, and item O2B, ordinance amending City Code, Chapter 11, Section 11-45, benches, chairs, planters, and other street furniture on sidewalks and plazas. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Ms. Tony Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Zoning Administrator Catherine Thurston will oversee both of these items for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Wilmington City Council. Before you this evening are two ordinance amendments, one to Chapter 4, Section 109 pertaining to sidewalk cafes, and a companion ordinance amending Chapter 11, Section 1145 pertaining to street furniture. The substantive changes are to extend the allowance for sidewalk cafes to more districts, allow this use for both restaurants and bars, add definitions related to the use, expand the occupancy allowance for establishments operating sidewalk cafes, to codify the appeals process, and to clarify hours of operation and the term for which such uses are allowed. Sidewalk cafes are currently allowed only in the CBD. They used to also be allowed in the Main Street mixed use, but with the code rewrite, that zoning district was removed from the code. So currently, only the area shown in purple on your screen allows sidewalk cafes. With the proposed changes, sidewalk cafes would be allowed in the urban mixed use districts, which is what a lot of the Main Street mixed use was rezoned to. The HDMU, which is located along Red Cross Street, generally east of 4th, and then also in the mixed use, the MX Legacy District, and that would include Autumn Hall and Mayfair, and some other smaller MX developments. This use could also, with the proposed changes, be allowed in other commercial districts as long as the development pattern would be suitable for a sidewalk cafe and pursuant to special approval by the city manager. Currently, only restaurants are allowed to operate sidewalk cafes, and they have to be licensed pursuant to Chapter 18B of the North Carolina General Statutes, and that does include a requirement that 30% of the total sales be in food, and this proposal would allow bars that don't sell food or that have less than their food sales as 30% of the total sales. This would allow them to operate sidewalk cafes as well. Staff also noted that there were some terms that were missing from this chapter, including eating and drinking establishments, nightclubs, and sidewalk cafes, so we propose to include the definitions shown on your screen and in your packet as part of this amendment. Currently, sidewalk cafes are allowed to operate at 50% of the allowable indoor occupancy of the restaurant. In some instances, there are very small restaurants and eateries that may have space on the sidewalk that would be logical for a sidewalk cafe, but they're unable to operate one of a meaningful size due to this restriction. Staff proposes the occupancy be based on the safe outdoor seating area as established by the Fire Marshal's Office. And then finally, just as a matter of clarification, staff proposes to codify the appeals process for denied permits and to establish an hour at which sidewalk cafes are allowed to begin operating. Currently, they're required to close at 11, but there's no time at which they're able to open the next day that's specified. We also propose to align the terms of the permit with the city's fiscal year, which will be consistent with renewal periods for other annual permits, like sandwich board signs. Then we have this graphic to demonstrate a sample street subsection. In this illustration, the public sidewalk is shown in the two shades of teal. This is of a 13-foot wide sidewalk, which is generally consistent in the downtown area. You'll find sidewalks anywhere from 10 feet to 15 feet. There are some instances where it's much wider, but generally on measuring some of the major sidewalks that would be conducive to having a cafe, they were about 13 feet wide. So that would allow for a 5-foot furnishing zone along the curb to allow trees, trash receptacles, door swings from cars, and parking meters. On a sidewalk this width, a minimum 5-foot pedestrian zone is required, and that would allow up to 3 feet of the public right-of-way along the establishment to be used for seating. Sidewalks that are under 10 feet would be required to maintain a minimum of 4 feet clearance for pedestrians, which would be in accordance with ADA standards. And I am happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I'm also happy to move on to the companion ordinance if that is appropriate.
We have some
at this
questions
time.
here. We have Mr. Waddell.
First of all, I want to applaud you guys. This is, in my opinion, a wonderful move in the right direction. My wife and I, anytime we get the chance to eat al fresco, I don't know if I said that right, but if we get the chance to eat outside or drink outside, we take that opportunity every chance I get, especially living in a place like this. So commend the staff for this. I do have a quick question. Maybe it's just a point of clarification or verbiage, but Section 5E1 that deals with alcoholic beverages for sidewalk cafes, it states that the sidewalk cafe should be a part of a restaurant, but then the rest of the ordinance, the language is changed from restaurant to eating or drinking establishment. Was that just an oversight on that ordinance? Mr. City Attorney, Mr. City Manager, yeah. Well, then I would just ask if we do approve it, we just amend that.
We could amend that to say eating and drinking establishment,
Okay.
as would be consistent with the rest of the changes.
I think, let me make sure. That's my only question. Thank you.
Councilmember, you're about the 8th set of ayes, and you caught the one that we all missed.
Even a blind blind dog, I don't know. There's a saying for that. I don't know.
Ms. Haynes?
Thank you. I actually had the same concern. I tried to carefully read the whole thing. So that was on Section 5, but on Section 4, on the page before, it says, let me see, I have two concerns here. One says, that shows that it would be like your picture here, But then somewhere it says that it can also be on the street, at the curb. So then the pattern, the walking pattern would be basically in the middle of the sidewalk restaurant.
I will ask the city attorney to correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that under current ABC requirements, you're not allowed to pass the pedestrian clear zone with an open container, any kind of alcoholic beverage at this time. It was written in such a way that establishments not serving alcohol could potentially have their furnishings out at the curb line. And then if that were to change with North Carolina general statutes, then the code would already read such as to allow alcoholic beverages to cross through that pedestrian zone. Now, I'm going to wait for the correction.
It seems to me that if the code does not allow for that, we should not have that in our ordinance. And have we in the past had bars that don't serve food be able to have sidewalk seating?
Well, this would be for restaurants and bars. They'd just be eating and drinking establishments. So yes, we have had, Port City Java, for example, operates the Sidewalk Cafe. And
well, that's not a bar.
But they would be considered a restaurant, and to the best of my knowledge, they don't serve alcohol. But they would be allowed to.
All right, okay. How about the way I read it, maybe I'm wrong, I certainly stand to be corrected. It sounds to me like if you're a restaurant that serves alcohol, you're good, right? You can do this. But you've got to be up next to the building right now because you're serving alcohol. So you're not going to have the alcohol cross over the pedestrian way. And we dealt with that back during COVID and all. But what you're saying, or what I'm hearing is that if you are just a bar that doesn't serve any alcohol, that you too can do this. So have we done that in the past? That a non-food establishment?
This would be new because we haven't in the past allowed bars to operate sidewalk cafes. During COVID, we did have some allowances from the General Assembly to suspend that rule about the open containers along the pedestrian ways with the permission of the City Council, and I believe that was granted as part of the Downtown Alive program. If in the future things change with ABC requirements that would allow containers to cross through that pedestrian area, then the Sidewalk Cafe and the allowance for bars and nightclubs to operate sidewalk cafes would not have to come back before you for amendment. We would just maintain consistency with whatever ABC board allows.
Thank you. With all due respect, our city attorney has spent an enormous amount of time in his 5 years here bringing us in compliance with state law. And what you're putting in here does not comply with state law, and I don't believe that we should project that into the future. It's no problem to bring it back if the law changes. Mr. Joy has done that a number of times, and we accommodate whatever the state law is.
Just as a point of clarification, the language in here about out to the curb, ABC, if you have a restaurant that doesn't serve alcohol, then, or if you would have a slushy shop, then the ABC law just isn't applicable. Those establishments under what's before you as an amendment would be able to, under the right geography, have tables out at the curb, not necessarily right up at the building. You could have a sidewalk area that pedestrians pass through. If they serve alcohol, our ordinance would not prevent them from going out to the curb necessarily, but ABC law would.
I understand that.
And
I get it.
Part of it is you have to, in order to serve alcohol, you have to have an actual visual barrier. You have to have the tape around it, or the barricade, if you will. Helps everybody understand exactly where it needs to be. So we certainly could modify it if that's the wish of council to be more specific. The way it's written now, our ordinance doesn't conflict with state law. It's state law that is the more restrictive of the two. If it was ever loosened, then our ordinance wouldn't be affected by it. But it's certainly the wishes of council.
Who's going to monitor that? You know, we don't really monitor things. It's all complaint oriented. So, you know, that's just going to be a free-for-all, frankly.
I think they can.
We could monitor it as city staff. I mean, we have a pretty good understanding of whether or not the establishments serve alcohol, but I believe that we also recently hired 2 or 3 ALE officers in the city of Wilmington.
5.
5 to help monitor some of these concerns. Not this specifically, but just general violations of ABC law.
Okay. Mr. Ravenborough?
I just have just a slight question. In reading through this, it never specifically mentions wheelchair passability. I know when we first started granting the permits for people to put chairs out, particularly on Front Street, it was kind of like running the gauntlet, you know, getting past. Some of the tables would be too big or whatever. I just want to make sure that's something that's, I'm not saying to plug it into this, but that needs to be taken into consideration too, because I know when people pull up to a chair, they'll pull a chair from another table, and there you go, they're sitting in that 5-foot section. And, you know, ADA, it takes precedence over everything. Thank you.
Waddell?
Just to address, I think, Mayor Pro Tem's concerns, I think there's a few different, not variables, but steps that have to go through. I think the most stringent is that ultimately the applicant has to go through the city attorney's office now, right? Not through a committee as before. Is that correct? No?
No, it's not a committee. The older language was they had to produce frankly, a indemnity agreement that the city attorney had to pass. We changed that language to acceptable to the city.
Okay.
So we can do a template, and it's not a review every time. If they use our form, then we know it's right, just to make it more efficient.
And this is for my clarification. So the ABC law does not allow somebody on the far 5-foot section, the nearest the street, they can't operate something there because they can't walk through the street now. So that's moot, really, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, Bill. Yeah, just again, so I'm getting clarity again. So if it's a 4-foot, let's say if it's a 4-foot sidewalk, the establishment has to be on the inside of the 4 feet, right? I'm confused when you talk about the curb, because what can they put on the curb? They can't put anything on the curb.
No, I mean, if the sidewalk's only 4 feet wide, they would not
No,
have.
I mean, if it's 8, I'm saying it's an 8. Because you said the first 4, they could serve tables there in the first 4. But then I thought that we were saying something about they could put tables on the other side too, but you can't.
If you're saying that the sidewalk, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, but you're saying that on an
apologize.
8-foot wide sidewalk, what would
Yes.
they be allowed to do? They could use
Right.
up to 4 feet of that space for sidewalk cafe area.
Okay. And nothing is really going to go on the curb either way. Like if it's a 13-foot.
It's from the back of curb, so, you know, I guess the granite curbing, I wouldn't personally want to put one of the legs of my chair on that curbing.
Right.
But, I mean, I suppose that they could have chairs out there at an establishment that doesn't serve alcohol.
So that's the difference. If they serve alcohol, they've
can't.
got to stay up next to the building.
Right.
If they don't serve alcohol, they can be at the curb
Okay.
or the building. So you would basically be walking through the seating of the restaurant. So could you speak to the medallion process?
We do plan to utilize medallions as we did in the past whenever we operated this program. And, you know, if you look downtown, you can still see where a lot of the medallions are, and there is certainly a tendency for operators to place the sidewalk cafes up against the building anyway. There are some restaurants that have built the tables and chairs completely into the facade of their building somehow too. But we'll just place the medallions down, and then the chairs, you know, when they're pulled out and people are sitting at the table, are not allowed to extend beyond the medallions. No portion of the sidewalk cafe or furnishings could.
I did have one other question. Are existing sidewalk cafes, are they grandfathered in, or does everybody going to have to come back for a permit that's maybe have an existing cafe?
There will be an annual renewal process.
Okay.
And that part of that is to make sure that their indemnification agreement is up to date, and also their insurance that would cover if someone is injured as a result of their operation.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. What are the wishes of council in respect to the ordinance? We have a motion approved by Councilmember Waddell.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just want my motion to be with the amended language of Section 5E1 that we discussed regarding changing the term restaurant to eating or drinking establishment.
Okay. That's the motion on the floor. Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Do we have a motion to waive second reading? We have a motion made by Councilman Waddell, second by Councilman Rivenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Now to item O2B. What are the wishes of council in respect to O2B? We have a motion to approve by Councilman Rivenbark, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. Yeah. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilman Rivenbark, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item O3, which is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation to the Public Improvement / Equipment Fund for a Department of Homeland Security Port Security Grant and local match in the amount of $864,164 for the purchase of a total containment vessel and safe boat engine replacements. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Assistant Police Chief David Euler will overview this item for us.
Good evening. Before you tonight is the city was awarded a grant of $864,000 to replace the boat motors on our current boat that we have, and also to pay for a total containment vessel. There's a 25% match that goes with that in the amount of $216,000.
Okay, very good. Any questions, Mr. Euler? Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to the item? We have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilman Rivenbark. We do have a discussion. Mr. Waddell, did you put your name up there?
Sorry, I hit the button a little late. If we're paying for this new vessel out of fund balance, our future purchases, is this going to kind of be integrated into the fleet fund? Because I mean, it will need to be replaced at some point, I would assume.
This is not for the vessel itself. This is just for the engines on the back of it.
Isn't there an additional vessel that we're going to be purchasing?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
The explosive containment
Yes, sir.
vessel. So that will now be part of our fleet. And so in the future, that would
Yes,
be
sir, I
part of the
believe-
fleet fund, I would assume?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilman Rivenbark, second by Councilman Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item O4, which is an ordinance increasing the full-time authorized strength in the public safety function located in the general fund by 4 full-time equivalents for the city/county pilot program aimed at addressing the homeless population needs. This time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is in recognition of the joint city-county program that we are starting up this month regarding homeless populations. You'll recall that you authorized the use of ARPA funds for this program at a previous meeting. This just increases the number of full-time equivalents approved by council by 4 to recognize the addition of those 4 officers. We'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, Mr. Caudle? Mr. Waddell?
Once this is authorized, when is this team going to be deployed? Do we know?
The team is already working to put itself together. The county has not yet identified all of the folks that will be involved on their side. We haven't hired the folks that will be involved on our side yet, but hopefully we hope by January they'll be on the streets, but it may well be February or March, depending on the training responsibilities.
And then maybe within the first quarter, we can have some sort of metric feedback from both the city and the county on how it's going?
I think we can get a report. I don't know that we'll have metrics, but we can certainly get a report.
Thank you.
Barnett? Yeah. Tony, real quick, on the metrics that, and I don't know when that's going to be done, but one of the things that I wanted to know in particular, since we're going to be engaging the unsheltered population there in the community, the specific need, is it more mental health? Is it mental health / substance abuse? Is it one or the other? You know, just a percentage of that, because I mean, we've always been told by some of the homeless advocates that are out there that this is the primary needs is mental health and substance abuse counseling or help. So when they're engaging, I would like to know that commentary as to the engagement, how many people have been engaged, and what the specific need is. Okay.
We are in the process of, someone on staff described this as building the plane while we're flying it, but we're in the process of putting together this report and trying to work with Block by Block, who does the work through the MSD in the downtown area, to try and mimic some of what they've done. We'll take these comments and make sure that they're included in the reporting.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions? What wishes the council? We have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilman Ibark, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item, which is our resolutions. Item R1 is a resolution authorizing the conveyance of 3 surplus properties to the Cape Fear Habitat for Humanity Incorporated for the public purpose of providing affordable and/or no-cost housing to members of the Wilmington community. This time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Aubrey Parsley, our Economic Development Director, will overview this item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem. Members of Council, I have no slides for you tonight, but please do allow me a short lead-in. As I sat there at yesterday's agenda briefing and watched those students from Williston make that impressive presentation to you, it did make my mind wander a bit back to my time in school, and I started to think about some of the teachers I had when I was that age. Specifically, I thought about a science teacher. She was great, and still to this day I remember some of the lessons she taught me way back then. This item I'm presenting before you tonight actually made me think of one of those lessons. It was a class she did on the concept of resonance. Resonance in the sense of something that resonates with you. This was obviously in the context of a science class, but the reason I remember it is because she had this really beautiful way of describing it. She talked about resonance as this magic that happens when you add new energy to something at just the right frequency and at just the right time. And when that happens, when you add that new energy at just the right time and just the right frequency, the magic is that it has this amplifying, multiplicative effect and on the energy that's already in the system. So in other words, the sum of the parts is greater than those individual parts on their own. And I think that's really what we have here with this resolution, which looks to donate 3 vacant surplus properties on the north side of Wilmington to Habitat to Humanity for the development of affordable housing. Land values throughout the city are on the rise, and it's harder and harder to find these opportunities. But groups like Habitat are eager to take on new projects. And with council's recent passage of an updated land development code, that's what really brought about this opportunity. Under the old code, these properties would have been required to have off-street parking. Under the new code, they are not. So given the size of these parcels, with that requirement having been lifted in the new LDC, this opportunity came about. So this project, this resolution, appears to me to have the ingredients for residents. We have the right energy, the right frequency at the right time, and the hope is that the partnership will amplify the public benefit that we're able to provide. So with council's approval, these properties would serve to add to Habitat's already outstanding track record in the area, especially on the north side. Habitat has made over 70 investments on the north side of Wilmington. And with these donations approved by council tonight, they'd be able to add to that already impressive roster. With us tonight is Ms. Lauren McKenzie. That's the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity. She would be happy to take any questions. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you for the consideration.
Any questions? Okay. All right, we have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to council's appointments, committees for boards and commissions. And at this time, I'd like to recognize, I think, Councilmember Waddell. You're going to make the presentation?
I serve on the appointments, boards, commissions, and committees with Councilmember Ravenbart and Councilmember Anderson. Go through our appointments. The Golf Course Advisory Committee, reappoint Steve Bridges with a term expiring 10/9/25. Reappoint Charles Woodall, term expiring 10/9/25. Reappoint Tony Upchurch with a term expiring 10/9/25. Appoint Joseph Anthony with a term expiring 10/9/25. Move Craig Davis to alternate 1 and appoint Chris Dean as alternate 2. Moving to Municipal Services District Advisory Committee, reappoint Ray Worrell, term expiring 7/1/25. Moving to New Hanover County, City of Wilmington Community Relations Advisory Committee, appoint Shirley Hands, term expiring 9/20/23. Moving to Downtown Parking Advisory Committee, reappoint McKay Siegel, term expiring 8/1/25. Moving to Sister City Commission, appoint Sabrina Terry to fill a vacancy for the Cape Fear Community College, term expiring 9/1/23. Moving to finally Joint City of Wilmington, New Hanover County Workforce Housing Advisory Committee, appoint Michelle Jarman to fill a vacancy for the Financial Community, term expiring 8/20/23.
We have a motion to approve. We have a motion to approve by Councilman Ravenbart, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. This concludes the regular agenda. Are there any items to be brought forward by our city manager? City attorney?
Yes, sir. Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you and the rest of council for choosing me as your city attorney and for allowing me to serve for a little over 5 years. It has been a wonderful time. It's been a great honor, and at times, it's been quite the adventure. Thank you all very much, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much, John. Madam Clerk? Mr. Waddell? Mr. Barnett?
Thank you, John, for your service. And I just want to remind our citizens that early voting starts Thursday, October the 20th, and it runs through November the 5th. Election day, of course, is November the 8th. I encourage you to vote. I encourage you to bring your friends, neighbors to the polls. This is a very critical election, and I would pray that we don't sleep on this election. So everybody, please go out and vote.
Mayor Pro Tem? Mr. Ravenbart? Mr. Spears? Okay, with that, I also want to say, John, thank you for your public service to this community, and I wish you well in your new endeavors. And I know you're going back home to Charlotte, North Carolina, but you made a difference, and we appreciate your hard work and all of your team's work and all of the work that you have done for the city of Wilmington over these last 5 years. It's been a joy. Thank you, sir. With that, thank you for taking an interest in your government. We stand adjourned.